Welcome to the Forever in Their Hearts podcast with Dale Martin Jr., brought to you by Martin Brothers, providing funerals designed and customized to be as special as your loved one lost. Now, here's your host.
Well, yes, this is your host, Erik Reynolds, and I'm back with Dale Martin Jr., president of Martin Brothers Funeral Services, and today Dale will be discussing what to do when a friend has died. So today we will be discussing who to call and what to say, and should flowers be sent or a donation be made. Now, before Dale joins us, just as a reminder that if you have questions or require assistance, you can reach Martin Brothers Funeral Services in Vancouver at 778-330-7799. Again, that's 778-330-7799. Now, Dale, welcome back to the call today. I'm glad to be having this podcast with you.
Thanks, Erik. It's been good to be with you again.
Well, and this is a big question, and probably not answered or asked often enough, I should say, but should I call the family when a loved one or a friend has died?
Well, many of my friends will contact me and ask me questions, so-and-so's passed away, what do I do? And if you're younger, like in your 30s or your 40s, you may not be experienced with that other than maybe a family death. But when a friend of yours loses, for example, a parent, the question is, well, what do I do? And in this day and age, there may or may not be a funeral. It might be a religious service. It might be a memorial service at the golf course. It might be nothing at all. And what I encourage people to do is to at least get active. And the thing is, number one is to phone or stop by the house, make a deliberate action, and go and see them and give them a hug and just let them know you're thinking of them. And I think that's make the first move. They'll be so thrilled that you have. And it may mean, if the family are all at the house and dad has died, you may want to get together and bake a lasagna and a salad and some cookies and phone in the morning and saying, we're bringing dinner tonight, don't cook. And don't ask if you want to bring dinner, just show up with dinner. And that's what really good friends do. And with some fresh buns and a casserole or something like that, and just show up and say dinner is coming, and not to worry. Family members that you can always freeze a casserole, whatever. But the straight on gesture is a wonderful thing to break the ice for sure.
Now, when I'm visiting with the the loved ones of the friend that has passed away, is it appropriate to bring up their name?
Well, that's really important. If so-and-so's their dad has passed away, and let's say his name is Bob, it's so appropriate to use his name. It's because some people want to just tiptoe around it as if Bob never existed, but the family, they want you to know and remember Bob. So when you see them, when you talk to them, the big hug is, I'm so sorry about Bob. We are really going to miss Bob, and give him a hug. And people want to hear his name. I know it might be difficult and you might feel a little uncomfortable venturing out to use his name, but it's important. And to tell a story about Bob is also wonderful. To say, hey, I remember your dad when we were kids, and he was the one who taught me how to water ski. And we went to the lake, and when I think I was only 14 years old, and your dad was the one, he tried and helped me get up on skis. And if it wasn't for your dad, I would have never learned to water ski. And you've got to tell those stories, and I think families gather great strength from that. And Erik, I know that you've got a pastoring background. I think you know what I'm talking about. And
right.
And one of the things that families need to know is that you care and that you engage with them. And I think that's the bottom line. Be comfortable and engage at that level.
Well, Dale, and I do have a pastoring background, and not just for my former parishioners, but even for myself. One thing was always difficult is what do I do? Do I send flowers? Do I make a donation? What's an appropriate gesture to make in that regards?
Well, like in my first comment, it's better do something. Don't do nothing. Do something, and absolutely send flowers to the house, and do a nice card, and say, we are thinking about you. And we're thinking about Bob, and we will miss him. And so if the family if they've asked for donations, like those who wish may donate to the Canadian Cancer Society, wonderful idea, or the often people will do donations to the ailment. Like if it was an Alzheimer's, if so-and-so had died of Alzheimer's, they might say donations made to the Alzheimer's unit. Follow up and do that. And sometimes people will say, in lieu of flowers, make a donation to the charity. But I always say send flowers anyways. In the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, as funeral directors, we'd have hundreds of bouquets at funeral service of flowers because people really wanted to somehow be involved and make a statement. So I think we will sometimes make the donation and send a bouquet of flowers. And it's not that the family don't want the flowers. It's just that they prefer the donation. So if you want to do both, that's fine too. Or if you want to, like I said, make them supper and bring it over, that's great. And I think those acts are very well remembered.
Well, Dale, I've got another question for you, and this one's a biggie. What's the appropriate thing to say, or sometimes more appropriately, or more importantly, what's important not to say?
Well, that's an absolute landmine, Eric. And if you don't take anything away from this little session that we're having today, the most important thing is to never tell people how to feel. The mistake that we can make as friends is we can say things, oh, you'll get over it. Time will heal. I mean, I've heard people say, well, you'll meet someone new, when a spouse is lost. Or people offering advice is a very dangerous thing. And if you remember this, whatever you say to a grieving individual, try to remember to put it in a question. All your comments, if they're in a question, you will always be safe. It's like, how are you feeling today? Did you get any sleep last night? Have you eaten today? How are the kids taking it? Is your mom going to be, is she coming to town? Are your brothers going to be? Is the family getting together? The family will respond and tell you just a wealth of information. You might even say, gee, I didn't know your dad was sick. Had he been sick for long? And they'll tell you the story. They'll say, well, Dad hadn't been feeling well. He was 78 years old, and we knew he was diabetic, but he dealt with his diabetes very well, but he also had a little bit of heart trouble. Well, the doctors, he'd had a checkup. He'd been fine. But after dinner on Sunday, he laid on the couch, and he really wasn't feeling well, and then we knew to call the ambulance, and it went from there. Families have a story, and they kind of want to tell you that story. So as a friend, it's really important to be there to listen to that story. And try not to tell them how to feel. Grief is a very personal thing, and if this is the most important thing I can ever encourage people to remember is that when people have grief in their life, they will deal with it differently. There's a book about the seven stages of grief. I mean, Eric, you might be familiar with it, but there are all kinds of highs and lows with grief. People can be angry, they can be desperately sad, they can feel guilty. They can be hilariously, they can laugh sporadically about stories about their loved one. They can go into depressions. They can go on highs and lows. And so your grief is very much your own. So just tread lightly with your friends and family members. And remember, put everything into a question. You'll never go wrong.
Now, Dale, before we finish up today, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I think the bottom line, and I always talk about, when death occurs in our own family, even if you expect it one day, when death does come, it's still sudden. And amongst your family, just be there to support one another, and certainly your friends and your family group. Remember to be supportive. Make the first step to help your friends. And also on a personal note, always remember you should have your funeral prearrangements, your own personal wishes written down, and you can go to our website at mbfunerals.com and submit your funeral wishes right online. We have 10 questions that you can answer very easily. There's a spot where you can type in your wishes and submit it to us, and we will register it and mail back a permanent copy for you, plus a wallet-size ID card that says, in the event of my death, my funeral arrangements are with Martin Brothers, and the contact information. That you do not have to pay for this service. It's just a very simple way of making sure you've got sort of the top 10 questions answered about your funeral arrangements. And then later on, if you wish to take it farther and prepay and make your arrangements more concrete, you can contact us at the funeral home and follow up with that. Because pre-planning your funeral wishes is probably one of the most unselfish things you can do for your family. So when that time comes, something's in place and the family have an idea what it is you want.
Well, Dale, once again, thanks so much for the conversation. But as always, we've come to the end and we are out of time. Now, for our listeners, if you can think of someone who might benefit from what we've covered here today, go ahead and forward this episode to them. I promise you they'll thank you for it. And of course, if you do have questions or require assistance, you can reach Martin Brothers Funeral Services in Vancouver at 778-330-7799. Again, that's 778-330-7799. Or you can visit the website Dale was just mentioning, which is www.mbfunerals.com. Again, that's www.mbfunerals, like Martin Brothers Funerals, mbfunerals.com. Well, Dale, as always, for myself, for the listeners, thanks so much for the conversation today.
Thanks, Eric. It was just a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Forever in Their Hearts podcast with Dale Martin Jr. from Martin Brothers Funeral Services. Our 4 generations of service in the funeral profession have equipped us with a legacy of understanding. In your hour of need, Martin Brothers is there. Call Martin Brothers in Vancouver today at 778-330-7799 and visit them online at www.mbfunerals.com.